2022's Chained Echoes was a breakout indie hit and one of the best modern takes on turn-based RPGs. Its multi-layered systems, steady sense of challenge, and strong storytelling coalesced into an experience that I still think about roughly 3 years later. Now, the highly anticipated Ashes of Elrant DLC has arrived after being announced late last year, delivering a sizable new scenario that unfolds right before the base game's ending. The marketing emphasized scope without giving away too many specifics, which definitely helped set expectations pretty quickly. And after I finished it, I'm pretty satisfied with this return to Eldrea. It all feels like a natural extension of the base game, and it's the kind of content that you can actually imagine landing if the story had stretched a bit further before the finale. Ashes of Elrant opens with the party getting drawn into a plot built around a surprisingly intricate case of time travel. It's a pretty lofty premise, and the narrative gets down to brass tacks quickly. At the beginning there's a brief recap, though I should say that it serves more as a reminder of the setting and the key events than a deeply summarized version of the entire plot. If you have not touched the game since 2022, a quick refresher is worth your time. Much of the DLC's impact relies on knowing who everyone is and what they're fighting for. The scenario is clearly made for players who want a little more of Chained Echoes' world. Through the new time travel framework, it surfaces truths that were previously implied, giving direct answers where the base game preferred hints. In practice, the DLC feels like the team laying all their cards on the table for fans who wanted closure on certain threads. The Harbinger receives more context and several characters get added texture to their histories and motivations. Len stands out with the most focus, which fits the arc that was built for her. The pivot into the past can be a little haphazard, but the payoffs land often enough to feel worthwhile. I was more mixed on how the DLC sprinkles in flashbacks for party members outside of Len. The idea is compelling, yet these moments sometimes arrive abruptly, as if triggered to ensure everyone gets a turn in the spotlight. The cast can feel a bit too large in these moments for the pacing, which actually does make sense given the timing near the base game's end when most of the allies are in play. To the DLC's credit, there are small scenes that try to give everyone a note or two. While they're not always substantial, no one feels blatantly sidelined either. Now, on the gameplay side, Ashes of Elrant maintains the identity of Chained Echoes. The overdrive bar still governs the tempo of combat, gear upkeep remains vital, and the loop continues to encourage going all in during fights because you reset afterwards. Several notable tweaks to core systems keep them from feeling like a simple victory lap. As you explore the new region, you'll notice that monsters now award party points alongside SP. This shared currency unlocks party talents in the skill menu, offering team-wide boons that range from stat bumps to a new fishing minigame. Fishing is straightforward and adds a small change of pace during exploration. There is also digging, which involves scanning an area for buried treasure. I didn't find digging particularly engaging since it leans on trial and error and wears out its welcome kinda quickly. A new reward board tracks goals tied to the DLC's content. It functions as a compact layer of progression that suits the overall scope. Crystals are also handled differently. Instead of gathering them for field sources, they now drop from enemies with fixed size and quality, and you can socket them directly from the equipment menu. Further, given that this is an expansion rather than a full sequel, these adjustments make sense. Doubling up on the encounter rewards and simplifying upgrade flows keeps progression brisk without any padding. All in all, it complements a revisit, giving you a lot to do without the sprawl of a new full-length campaign. Returning players who don't have a cleared save or who simply want to jump into the DLC will appreciate the option to load a pre-made completed file. After selecting Ashes of Elrant at the title screen, you can either pick your own cleared save or use the provided one. If you choose the latter, your party comes kitted with all skills unlocked but not fully upgraded. Aside from the DLC's new character known as the White Wolf, who begins the game as the ground floor and needs a little bit of attention to get rolling, it's a pretty considerable feature that lowers the barrier to entry for anyone who has been away or hasn't played the game. The White Wolf himself is a memorable addition. He's a pretty big personality, boisterous but respected, and his presence is felt whenever he is on screen. The arc that introduced him moves pretty quickly. There's a brief stretch patch where he is playable solo, which serves as both a narrative and mechanical primer, but it passes by quickly. Even so, his role is clear and he slots into the party dynamic without too much friction. In combat, he is a heavy physical attacker with a kit that supports straightforward frontline play, so in the end, he's pretty easy to understand and rewarding to bring along if you want raw output without a complicated setup. Combat overall remains centered on buffs, debuffs, and team synergy, which means returning after some time away is kind of overwhelming within the first hour. You gain access to a broad roster fairly early, and the sheer volume of skills takes a moment to parse through if you have not been theory crafting since its launch. The default builds here help bridge that gap. Whether intentional or not, the opening arrangements give you a quick refresher on how to protect the overdrive state, stack the right effects, and push damage safely. Grunt encounters are relatively forgiving if you use the tools that are given, but the bosses demand some real preparation. I'd say that several of the encounters rank among the toughest in Chained Echoes, with patterns that force you to adjust loadouts, rethink turn orders, and shore up some weaknesses. The DLC also brings in roughly 40 new enemy types, which keeps the opposition unique in both presentation and mechanics. The spike between standard battles and bosses can feel a little steep, so there is a learning curve where your party setup evolves between attempts. That progression is satisfying when a plan finally clicks. Dungeon design is another steady highlight. Each area you visit has a clear identity, with layouts that nudge you into different rhythms of exploration. The flow is compact, yet there's enough small adjustments here to make each space feel purposeful rather than filler. The soundtrack helps as well, where there's been 15 more tracks added and a new standard battle theme that is easily my favorite, as it stands shoulder to shoulder with the base game's strongest music. It keeps the fights lively even when you're running rematches to refine a boss strategy. Looking at this DLC as a whole, Ashes of Elrant respects what made Chained Echoes special while trimming the friction points that could slow a revisit. The new systems fold in cleanly, party points and talents give you a communal sense of growth that sits nicely along individual upgrades. The crystal changes streamline tinkering, and the reward board focuses your attention on the new content without scattering goals across the map. Nothing here rewrites the rulebook, yet the quality of life adjustments make the DLC feel considered rather than bolted on. Narratively, it aims to enrich the world rather than one-up the base game's finale. That choice will resonate most with players who wanted explicit answers to a few lingering questions. The writing does stumble at times when juggling a large ensemble, or when flashbacks arrive with little setup, but the central beats of this DLC land pretty well. Lens spotlight is welcome, and the Harbinger material adds weight, and the final stretch ties the scenario together in a way that feels consistent with the tone of Chained Echoes. For fans of turn-based and classic RPGs, Chained Echoes already stood out as a modern classic that honored the genre's past while building up on its own identity. Ashes of Elrant is an easy recommendation if you have been looking for a reason to return. The combat is still the central point, the new systems keep the pacing, and the added lore rounds out the corners of the world that were previously left in shadow. Now, I would have preferred deeper character work for some of the party members and smoother framing for a few flashbacks, yet the overall package is cohesive and rewarding. If you love the original and have been yearning for something more, Ashes of Elrant is well worth your time. It brings back the thrill of the first run, sharpens a few edges, and sends the cast off with a final scenario that feels well earned. Noisy Pixel is giving Chained Echoes Ashes of Elrant an 8.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by Kirby Gamers, providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.